Hello, happy Sunday, and welcome into this week's edition of The Walkthrough. I'm your host, Intern Macheca, reporting live. It's been a big weekend for Gamecock athletics. South Carolina baseball had a wild week in Hoover. We will get to that, but first, I have a really special guest joining me this evening. He has been the play-by-play announcer for the South Carolina women's basketball team since 2007, has been serving as the director of content for the University of South Carolina Athletics since 2014. Also teaches one of the best classes at the J School. My guest tonight is the one, the only Mr. Brad Muller. Brad, how are we doing this evening?
I'm doing great, Joe. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely, of course. I had to have you on because I never got the chance to do this women's basketball team justice and do a full, kind of deep dive into this season. And I thought none better than to have you on to kind of give me the full scoop on everything. So we'll recap some of this year and then also look ahead to next year because we know next year's team's already going to be loaded.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of fun, when you have the bullseye on your back, and that's been a habit the last few years. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do next year after the first perfect season in program history.
Yeah, absolutely. And also congratulations on approaching, I believe, your 10th season I guess 2 now with but 10th season as the director of content for the university.
Yep.
So congratulations on that. But yeah, so this national championship run, perfect season. One thing I like to talk about our guy Chris Wellbaum with, I've had this conversation with him many a times. Every time you go into the year, you start off on a hot run. At any point, did you kind of think it was in the picture of, them completing the perfect season? Because Wellbaum has a theory that, like, at some point throughout the season, he can tell if they're going to be able to do it or not.
Yeah, I was never really sure 100% just because of what had happened the year before. You had a really good team with that team that everybody thought was going to, win another national championship after they had won it a couple of years ago with that freshies class with Aaliyah Boston, Zia Cook, Bree Beal, and, that whole group that was just so spectacular for 4 years. Now, at the beginning of the year, you always kind of thought, they're going to stumble somewhere because in addition to, the SEC, where there's plenty of teams that are good enough to beat you, they played a good non-conference schedule and, some hard games on the road where you just thought, they'll have an off night somewhere. They'll get tripped up or, somebody will see enough tape on them. I think what surprised me more was how quickly this team started the year. You start that season in Paris against a really good Notre Dame team that made a deep run as well in the NCAA tournament. And you weren't really sure. You knew you had talented folks on paper, but none of them had really been starters before, other than the transfer Tina Powell, because they were all playing behind the Aaliyah Bostons and the Bree Beals and the Zia Cooks and Victoria Saxtons. But, there was a lot of McDonald's high school All-Americans waiting for their turn. And then when they kicked Notre Dame's butt to start the season, I said, oh, okay, we'll be, if we stay healthy, there's a lot of potential here. You add that to the development of some of the younger players, the freshmen, Malaysia Fulwiley, especially Tessa Johnson got increasingly better as the season went on both ends of the floor. And then the development of players like Chloe Kitts and Ashlyn Watkins. It was just incredible that it all came together. It was, as a team that wasn't dependent on one person, that, on any given night, 8 or 9 or 10 players were going to play double-digit minutes. And, most of them were going to score 8 or 9 points. The leading scorer each night may only have 14 points, and it was going to be a different person every night. But, yeah, I wasn't sure when I thought they could go undefeated. As the season went on, though, you get a little more worried because of what had happened the year before. Like, if they're going to lose, don't let it be, in the NCAA tournament. But you don't want to lose on any other night anyway. You didn't want to lose to LSU. You didn't, because you want everything as it goes along. But, I don't know that I ever really let myself think they're going to go undefeated and win it all. Because I didn't want to be disappointed because of what had happened the year before, where they lost in the Final Four to Iowa after going undefeated. And I hated from that year that the only thing that people talked about was the one loss. And like, that was such a great team. They had a bad night with a great player having a career night, in Caitlin Clark that year. And you just didn't want to see that happen again. And, I tried not to think about it, the team going undefeated. But when, they got off to that good start and then they got the win in Baton Rouge, then I started thinking, well, this team can beat anybody. And then, and they did. They beat anybody and everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on a couple things. That Paris trip, first off, that was, a very big stomping of, my hometown team and, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And Niele Ivy, I grew up with her son, Jaden. So, it was always cool. Niele was always great to us with the student section and everything by the time I was all washed out of basketball. But, it was crazy to see that because my grandmother, also season ticket holder, she was texting me about this game and everything like that. And the anticipation was huge. And I did want to ask you if you did anything fun in Paris on the tail end of this as well. But you had the emergence of Malaysia Fulwiley really on the biggest stage of freshmen. And it wouldn't be a Dawn Staley team without really, really, really good freshmen. And Fulwiley, had a coming out party essentially on the biggest stage in Paris to start the year. Were you guys thinking about that? What was the kind of your thoughts on just that whole experience too in Paris?
Yeah, with Malaysia Fulwiley, she put on a show and put folks on notice right away that she was going to be a highlight reel. You knew she was going to have freshman moments and make mistakes, which she had her share of, during the season. But with just some of the flash that she could pull out there against good players and good teams. I mean, you saw that right away. Notre Dame, the behind the back layup, the no look, the bounce passes that somehow went through three defenders to someone cutting on the baseline for a layup. You realized, okay, this kid's got something special going on. All year long, people would ask me, tell me about Malaysia Fulwiley. And I said, she makes layups exciting because she doesn't just, do layups. She does something, at least once a game, she's going to do something that's an exciting version of a layup. And it was fun to see her adjust to the college game so quickly, and then develop it as the year went on. Obviously, she had a lot to work to do at the beginning of the season on the defensive end, such as learning not to foul 90 feet from the basket. Which I would throw my pen every time she did that, but she got a lot better at that. She really came a long way, as did Tessa Johnson. Tessa didn't quite have the same impact right away, but boy, her development on both ends of the floor, and you saw that in the final game of the year in the national championship, where there was times she was the best player on the floor. So it was neat to see freshmen develop and have big moments throughout the year. And then as for the trip to Paris itself, it was great because it was my first trip there. I did all the touristy stuff. We stayed in a great hotel that was close to everything. We did the Eiffel Tower. We did the Louvre, places I'll probably never go to again. I'm 54 years old, so I don't know that I'll ever, get back there. Unless we play there again. And then just walking around was neat, and just seeing things that you only see in books on TV or the internet or whatever. It was cool, and I was grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah, that's awesome. Me and my grandmother talked about going over there, but that would have been a rough trip, would have been a long one. But yeah, that's awesome. Glad you had fun out there in Paris. And then also too with the freshman Tessa Johnson, you brought up her. We'll be talking about her obviously with the national championship as we kind of get to that. But yeah, it just goes to prove, and this team was, the prime example of it, but all of Dawn Staley's teams, nonetheless, just anybody can pop off on a given night, right? And they trust each other to, make that happen. And, if Chloe Kitts is going off, they're going to get her the ball, right? 'Cause she's hot, she's ready to go, she's scoring. And so there was just similar, roles. Like when somebody was going, they would go and they would trust each other. Trust is obviously one of the bigger points of Dawn, and this is one of the many Dawn questions I'll probably ask you tonight. But how much does that speak to just the program and the culture, the fact that they all trusted each other, that they can get the job done essentially?
I think the biggest thing was Dawn trusting them because it was such a different team. There were so many jokes throughout the year about the previous group being the business like team, and this one was more like daycare, because they were just so loose, and I don't want to say immature, but they were just different. They handled everything differently, and it was such a 180 from what the coaching staff was used to. So just Dawn trusting herself, trusting the players that, okay, this isn't how we normally do it. This isn't how I normally like to do things. She would always joke how they would, they'd have a lot of bad practices, but they'd show up on game day and play well. And as a coach, I know that killed her because, she is a very disciplined player, and she would never stand for bad practices, but she just trusted that they were going to put it together on game day, and that you know, they were just different. And for whatever reason, it worked. You had people emerge. You know, you weren't sure if Camila Cardoso, who was kind of in the shadow of Aaliyah Boston in the previous years, if she was going to emerge to be the star when she was, quote unquote, on her own without the All-American next to her. And yeah, she played like an All-American most of the year. And just the development and just it was neat that, you know, I think one of the things that, you know, helped create that trust, I think very early you saw that teams really had to work hard to defend this team because in previous years, let's say, you knew just about everyone was going to throw a zone, double team Aaliyah Boston, keep a hand in front of Zia Cook's face, and they'll take their chances with anyone else scoring. Yeah. With this team, you couldn't really do that because if you double team somebody on this team, you had 5 legitimate scorers on the floor at any time. And the bench was so deep. Yeah, anytime you came to the bench, those 2 or 3 that were the first off the bench, they were threats to score as well. So this team, I think what made them so tough was they were so hard to defend because you had to pay attention to all 5 that were on the floor, no matter which 5 were on the floor. Whereas other teams, as good as they were, each player kind of had their niche roles. Some were more defensive minded, you know, some, you know, maybe had one skill set offensively, but this team just had so much depth that you had to pay attention to everybody, and that's hard.
Yeah, you're talking about practice, man. That was the only thing practice. I'm sure that drove Dawn up the wall because, again, we've as part of the media, we've gotten to see a couple of her practices, and I'm sure behind closed doors, it's even better. And for a basketball junkie like me, being from like Indiana, like I love to see like Dawn's basketball brain come out because I'm sure it's really deep. Again, another Dawn question here, but like, have you seen the kind of the depth of the full depth of her basketball brain? Like, what is that like being able to see that on a daily basis?
Well, the neat thing is, you know, I started calling games for Carolina a year before she got here. So I got to see her, you know, from day one. It was her first year was my second year with the program. And the neat thing over the last, 16 or whatever years she's been here was her development as a coach. Obviously, she always had a great basketball mind. She was a good basketball coach at Temple. But her evolution as a coach here and seeing how she had to change at times, not just this year, you know, where she had to adapt to a different group and how they did things. But I can still remember, gosh, this is going back maybe 12 years ago when the team was still building, and she was accustomed to coaching the kids that she would get at Temple that were a lot more city kids and all that, whereas the kids she was getting here were from all over the place, and maybe they couldn't quite handle the abrasiveness, the yelling, you know, as much because they weren't coached that way. They were maybe a little more sensitive, whatever. Right. And I'll never forget, we were on a double road trip for some reason. And so we were practicing in someone else's gym after one game. And I remember practice wasn't going well and she was fit to be tied. And then she kind of caught herself and she stopped and she realized this wasn't working. Like how she was handling this team wasn't working. Yeah. And she stopped and she calmly explained whatever she wanted, you know, to whatever. And I remember in that moment, it just stuck with me. She changed as a coach right then and there because she had to do something different with that group. She couldn't do it the way she had always done it. And that's something she's done over the years. She's always been able to adapt. You know, she's obviously gotten more talent the last 10 years or so, where maybe she doesn't quite have to yell as much, you know, because, you know, she's got more talent to work with. But she's always been able to adapt herself to what she has and change, not just change habits of players, but change some of her own things that goes against, you know, maybe some of the things that she would normally do. Because, you know, players are different. Kids are different now than when she, you know, started coaching here. It's a whole generation, you know? So just her ability to change and adapt every year, you know, alter her style a little bit and how she handles all her players individually off the floor. You know, once practice is over, somebody could have had a bad practice and caught an earful from any of the coaches, but as soon as practice is over, it's, you know, an arm around the shoulder and, you know, hey, how are things going? It's, you know, nothing's ever personal, you know, like that once the basketball ends. And it's just neat the way she has changed as a coach and the way she develops relationships with players. And I think that's why you see so much success with so many players that want to come in and they want to stay in, even if they're not starting right away. You know, they still, I think this year was really neat to see, knock wood, that after they won the championship, and nobody hit the portal. You know, and there's a lot of kids that could be starters on a lot of other teams, but they like what's going on.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a good little note that you threw in at the end there, because again, like, and I mean, this season was a perfect example for that, because like the roles and just the way everyone, was able to do their job when it was, needed, because the season goes up and down and you're going to need different things on different nights and matchups and whatnot. That was a really, really good point you threw in there, snuck in there at the end, just about nobody transferring, because it also goes to say about the culture and everything also that Dawn's building and everything like that. And also, being able to adapt as well. I think that's, one of her best traits. Her point guards are notoriously, or she's a little bit harder on her point guards than notoriously, but then she also gets it from her point guards, I think, or gets it out of her point guards. I think Raven Johnson is one of the prime examples of that. You get to see that a lot too. Do you have a take on that? Like, she was a guard and she's one of the greatest guards of all time, so it's hard to offer a rebuttal to that.
I mean, she wants to be able to trust whoever's running point. She wants to have that trust that they're going to handle it, and when things aren't going right, they're going to hear about it. This past year was great because she had the luxury of having two different point guards that had different ways of going about it. Raven was the more up tempo. And then when Pow would slide over from the 2-guard to point guard, she was more of a slow it down, half court set, but they each had their strengths and did different things better. And I think that was very helpful, not to the team, but to the coach as well, knowing what they needed in the moment in terms of, all right, is this when we need to move, or is this when we need to slow things down? Who do we want, running the show right now? But she's always been keen on developing talent at point guard since she got here, because she knows how important it is. It's like a quarterback for, in football, that you've got to have good point guard play if you want to compete. Obviously, you need kids who can score, who can, shoot from the perimeter, or a big kid who can hit a 3 or 4 footer all the time, more than half the time, but you got to have good point guard play. And that's something she's always been able to develop. She's got a lot of talent right now, but over the years, it's been neat to see her develop people into really good point guards, like Aisha Walker, going back however 10, 12 years ago, turned into a really, really good point guard for South Carolina, was part of the team that her first NCAA tournament team here in 2012 that got to the Sweet 16. I mean, she's just, ever since then, she's just been able to, pass on her knowledge enough to where these kids trust her to not just do things the way they've always done it. You may be really good at doing this, but that's not going to win us ball games. You need to do it this way. And to be able to convince them year to year to adapt certain things, she lets them be themselves for the most part, but there are certain things, about their game she's going to tweak that, this is what we need to do, or this is what we need not to do. I went back to when I was talking about Fulwiley earlier. As good as she is, yeah, there's things that you want to tweak with her. You don't want to slow her down, but you want her to pick things up a little bit better defensively. And I think she did that as the season went on. She was a lot smarter defensively. So just little things like that, and just developing the point guard position over the last 10, 12 years has been a huge part of the success of the program.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tahina Paopao was, unlike a lot of guards that we've seen from Dawn in the past, shooting the 3. And I mentioned, or we were talking off camera a little bit before this, that Tahina Paopao's 3-ball call from you is one of my favorites. Tahina Paopao is so awesome. I know you like to use bang too. You have a bunch of different 3-point calls, but Tahina Paopao is so awesome.
Yeah, well, it's the perfect name, and she's such a neat young lady too. If I know you've had a chance probably to interview her or see her up on the dais after games, and the girl is always smiling. You can't help but be happy when you're around someone like that. Same with Raven Johnson. We got the 2 smiling point guards, and but yeah, it's just kind of fun. It wasn't anything I thought of beforehand. I think it was the first game against Notre Dame. She hit a 3, and it just kind of came out of my mouth, pow, 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 because it was big. We were expecting that she was going to be something we hadn't had in a while, and that was a very consistent 3-point shooter. And boy, she was more than that. She was fantastic, and you just hope if she can put another season together like that, having a shooter like that just opens everything up, because it prevents a lot of the double teams and the collapsing inside, because you have to respect her 3-point game. Heck, go back to the SEC tournament game against Tennessee, where the Gamecocks get the buzzer beater from Camilla.
That
they
was
were
coming up. That was
doubling,
coming up.
paying too much attention to Pow because they didn't want her to beat you, which I get. She's the best shooter in the country, and they forgot to guard Camila Cardoso. Now I know Camila wasn't a 3-point shooter, but you at least got to guard her, or at least guard the inbound pass, right? They didn't do either. And having someone like Pow on the floor just makes your team better for reasons like that. That sometimes they got to pay too much attention to her on the perimeter, and it opens things up more times on the inside, but on that occasion, Camila on the outside for a game winner.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the fact that she is a 3-point shooter because, again, it's a different element of basketball that we've seen from this team out of Dawn schematically. It's just it's a lot more alive when there's a 3-ball shooter in the mix.
Yeah, the neat thing with Tahina that I always like to tell people is, as good as she is, shooting around 50% or just under 50% from three all season long, is when you look at her game, she's not the kind of player that needs to go out there and shoot 10 threes a game. Most of the time, she's shooting 3, 4, maybe 5 3-pointers in a game. She's not one that feels like, oh, I've got to get my shots because, this is what I do. It's, oh, you left me open, or we rotated the ball quickly. Yeah, I'm shooting it. But she, she's looking, she's very mature where she's always looking inside first, but they leave her open, she's going to take it. But again, she's not one that has to, quote unquote, get hers and shoot it 10 to 12 times a game from the perimeter. Most of the time she's only taken 5 3-pointers or less, but she's going to make more than half of them. So that's what makes her special as well.
Yeah, that 50%, that's a ridiculous clip. I don't care who you are. Like, as any shooter in any league, especially in women's basketball is evolving and all of that stuff, and it's getting so much better. And a lot of those are contested too. Like, she does not have a lot of airspace out there when she's taking those.
Yeah, she does a good job to create her own shot. And a lot of it, too, comes from her teammates with quick rotations, kick it in, kick it back out, and the defense would collapse, back inside on one of the bigs, and just positioning herself to where she can get a good look at the basket. I mean, she was just very smart about when to shoot and when not to shoot. And again, that when you're shooting uncontested shots in games, those are practice shots, and you knock them down.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I love that. So you were alluding to it a little bit, the SEC tournament, the Camila shot. What were you thinking when Camila was open and flashed to the top? And did you know she was going to shoot it? Because in the moment, that's pretty hard, I'm sure.
Well, I remember right before it, I was a little bit angry because when they fouled Malaysia Fulwiley coming up the sideline, they'd wrapped her up. I mean, and to me, that should have been, an intentional foul. And I was thinking we should be shooting free throws. I was so angry because it was not in my mind, I didn't think they'd called the right foul. I thought, it should have been an intentional foul because anyway. And then, I kind of noticed that there was a lot of confusion on Tennessee. I could see that Dawn was talking to Camila, saying something to her. I couldn't quite make it out. I found out later what she said. She said, shoot it. But there was confusion because at first someone came to step in front of Raven on the inbound, and then they stepped way back. And that person who stepped way back that initially was going to, guard the inbound pass wasn't guarding anybody. And I remember thinking, that's weird. And then when I saw Camila wide open, the first thing in my mind was going, oh, please don't let her pass it. Because Camila is so unselfish and doesn't like the spotlight that, in my mind, I'm thinking she's going to pass it and there's going to be no time to shoot it, And I think I was as surprised as anyone, pleasantly surprised that she took the shot. Wasn't surprised. I mean, it was a surprise, when she made it because it was so dramatic, but they shoot the post players shoot 3-pointers in practice every day. It's part of a drill they do. They call it 7 spots where they have everybody running up and down the floor. And all the post players are shooting threes all season long in practice. It's not like she hadn't shot from there, but she just hadn't shot from there in a game. But it was neat. I remember, I don't even remember what I said. I'd have to go back and look at the video, but I just remember being really excited and just seeing, everyone rush the floor. We hadn't had one of those in a while. Sometimes it works against you, and it was just neat to see. And I was really happy for her because, as you know, with Camila, she's the gentle giant, the 6'7", teddy bear, if you will. She's a kind person, and you just like to see good things happen for people like that. And it was a great moment for her.
Yeah, absolutely. Camila Cardoso is one of the most gentle people that we've ever met. Like, she is so nice and so caring and love it and all that stuff. So she's great. And that game was insane. I think the call, I went back and watched it last night. I think it was a crisp bang. You gave us a Camila. Yeah. And I also like it too. I mean, you probably don't like getting fired up on air, but I was listening similar to the national championship game. There were a couple foul calls. I was listening to it on the radio as I was driving to Augusta for the Masters and whatnot.
Yep.
And so I had your broadcast, and you were fired up in that a little bit because I mean, Caitlin Clark was getting a couple fouls, but I mean, we had known. Go ahead.
It was rough, and usually you don't like to make, even in the class that you had mentioned before. I always tell folks, don't. There's always going to be things that you disagree with or you don't think were called right. And usually you try to keep it in perspective. But when it just kept, when it's repeatedly going against you and blatantly going against you, and again, I guess the tone was set early on, and folks can go back and watch the TV footage from the game when Bree Hall was guarding Caitlin Clark in the first quarter, and she was right in her face, and Caitlin Clark gave a two-handed shove to knock Breezy away from her and sent Breezy, head over tea kettle, just tumbling backwards. And then they throw Clark the ball and she buries the three. And I thought I was going to lose my mind just because, it happened right in front of the Carolina bench. And I see all our coaches going, how is that not a foul on, Caitlin Clark with the two-handed shove? And I just remember thinking, if it's close, there's no way we can win this game if they're not going to call that. And I probably said that out loud. I probably shouldn't have, but my emotions got the better of me. But I just remember, all right, that wasn't a call that I missed. That was a horrible no call. And then later in the game, it was frustrating as well. There was a drive to the basket. I think it was Raven was driving to the basket and Caitlin Clark fouled her. And they put the foul on somebody else for Iowa. And I was looking around like, no, and it's just, maybe that other person had fouled somebody before Clark fouled Raven, but it was one of those things where I remember thinking, man, if it's close, it's 8-on-5 out there. And I don't usually like to say that about officials because they have a tough job. And, most of the times they don't have a rooting interest. They're professional, but there was just there were some head scratchers in that were very frustrating. And I spoke to Coach after the game, actually the next morning, about some of those, and she felt like I did, even more so, that there were some things that just were not correct. So I felt validated after that she also felt that there were some things that just didn't feel right. But anyway, it all worked out. Gamecocks won. That's all that mattered.
Yeah. Absolutely. And no, I love it when you get fired up, because I know like you keep it pretty straight. Like you don't really lean necessarily as far into South Carolina's favor as some, announcers in the SEC normally would, if I see a Bama or a Auburn kind of football thing traditionally.
Yeah.
So like if you're fired up, like everyone's fired up. Everyone needs to be fired up because something is wrong. And so, I love it. I did want to ask you, obviously about the national championship. I was talking to our guy, Jonathan Hampton, and, he's great and he helped Dawn out, as a grad assistant for a while, game planning. And, he's like, yeah, Dawn had a plan for Caitlin Clark the first time. It just, the shots didn't hit, right? They didn't hit the first couple shots. And that game just kind of, got away from them. And so I talked to him and I'm like, hey, like, are they going to, try similar things? He's like, yeah, Dawn's ready for her this time. So obviously she was, but what a game that was.
Yeah, the execution of the game plan, I believe it was assistant coach Winston Gandy, who was new to the Gamecocks this year, that it was his scout of Iowa, and he implemented some things in there of how they were going to play Clark. And they had different players guarding Clark, all night, whether it was Bree Hall, Raven Johnson, Tessa Johnson. There was different folks on her all night, but the consistent thing was the literal in your face, just really trying to make her uncomfortable. Now, of course, she got off to a great start. What, she have 18 points in the first quarter or something?
Something like that. Yeah.
And you're thinking, oh man, this isn't going to go well. But they kept at it. And I think she only had 3 points in the second quarter and, was relatively human, the rest of the game after the 18-point first quarter. So it was a really good game plan and they executed it well. And yeah, the difference this year on the other end, South Carolina hit shots. The year before when they lost, obviously Clark went off, had a great game, had 40 points that she had. She was unstoppable that night. But despite that, in that loss, South Carolina still had the ball with a chance to tie or take the lead on its last possession of the game. And then, had a bad carom off the rim that came right back to an Iowa player, and we didn't get a second shot and the game was over. So as bad as it was the year before, we were still right there. It just didn't work out. But she was magnificent that night. Caitlin Clark was. You just felt like it didn't matter how close you were; she was going to win it. It was her night. But fortunately, this year it was South Carolina's night. They had a really good game plan. Again, I think Coach Gandy did a great job with the scout, and they executed it to near perfection, and really wore Caitlin Clark down to the point where you could tell she didn't have it in the second half. To me, even though it was still a close game, when Raven Johnson got that steal from Caitlin Clark right before halftime at half court and took it the other way for a layup, I think that put us up 3 or 5 or whatever it was. And at that point, I felt like South Carolina's going to win, because I just saw how deflated and how much lack of energy Clark had. She was worn down, not just from our game, but I think the UConn game before, when Nika Mule, the point guard for UConn, was like practically wearing the same jersey, similar defense to what we were doing. Mm-hmm. And I think both teams did a really good job of wearing her down, where she became human, you know, and it was just great execution. So it was a lot of fun to witness.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Coach Gandy. I got to pick his brain about it because it's so interesting. Again, and the wear it down factor, like, that's old school basketball. That's like something out of Dennis Rodman's book that, that they would pull out to try to stop Jordan kind of thing. So it's really interesting. I'll definitely have to pick his brain about it when I get the chance to talk to him. Super interesting. EXO checking in, says, I will forever remember the season. Dawn and enthusiastic but slightly unruly kids. Camilla was our rock. No one could stop us. It was special. Appreciate EXO checking in. She's always in the comments. And yeah, absolutely. Couldn't have said it any better myself. Brad, so before I get you out of here, I do want to talk about next year's team, which is crazy to think that they might be better than this year's team. They're returning all but Camilla.
Yeah, right now, Camilla, who's playing in the WNBA now. And, obviously that's a big loss, because Camilla was an All-American, but it's hard to replace 6'7", no matter what you bring in. You can bring in all these other great, all-star forwards that are 6'3", 6'4", but 6'7" is just a tough matchup, because not too many people have a 6'7" that can play. A lot of times if you see someone that has like a 6'6" or a 6'7" on the roster, but she doesn't have any stats, and you're like, all right, this girl can't catch, or she can't bank it off the window or whatever, and Camilla fortunately was big and very skilled. And so that is hard to replace. But as you mentioned, you got everyone else coming back, and you got a very good freshman class. Joyce Edwards, the National Player of the Year, is going to be a big forward that you're hoping she can contribute right away. You expect that she will be the national freshman, the National Player of the Year in high school. But the nice thing is she doesn't have to right away be the superstar, because you've got so many other kids returning. You've got Adele Tack, who was actually with the team in the spring. She had knee surgery. She should be good to go, last I heard, for next season. She's another big, very talented
6'5".
And then you brought in another point guard in Madison McDaniel. So those are the three you bring in. You haven't brought in anyone in the portal because you didn't really need it. Coach usually likes to keep the roster around 12, or a little bit less, because if you have many more than that, then people get unhappy because they're not playing. I think one of the bigger challenges, knock wood, if everyone stays healthy next year, they're going to play a good schedule again, because, they're going to play UConn, who's going to be loaded next year. They're going to play UCLA, because we owe a return trip to them. They were loaded this year. They're going to be loaded next year. You got the usual SEC schedule, plus Texas and Oklahoma are coming into the league. We're going to play Texas twice. That's the team we get twice next year, and they were a top 10 team this year. So that'll be fun in SEC play, having those two new opponents, and we'll play perhaps one of the best teams in the league twice. That's the team we're going to get twice this year. The schedule maker decided, let's make some make made for TV things. But I think that the key next year for South Carolina is Dawn was able to do it this year, where she's able to keep everybody happy even when they weren't starting. Okay, now you've got all those players that have another year under their belt that rightfully think they should be starting, but you can only start 5, right? So you got the good problem of, you've got like an Ashlyn Watkins and a Malaysia Fulwiley and a Tessa Johnson who came off the bench. Okay, are they going to earn a starting spot this year? Potentially. Some or all of them could, right? If they do, then who's coming off the bench? Is, Chloe Kitt's coming off the bench? It's just going to be really interesting. Where does Sanaya Fagan fit into this? Is she starting at the beginning of the year? And then with Edwards' development, what happens there? It's just going to be neat to see how she balances that. I don't have any doubt she'll be able to do it, because she did it this year, where folks were happy they were getting double-digit minutes coming off the bench. And a lot of times, sometimes there was games where players off the bench were playing more than some starters. So it's just that dynamic of, for lack of a better word, making sure everybody's happy and, with their role, even if they're not the one that's running out of the tunnel to hear their name at the beginning of the game, that if they're still happy coming off the bench, they should have plenty of depth, just like last year. So it'll be fun. But of course, just like the team from 2 years ago, they'll have that big target on their back now, because they're not going to sneak up on anybody after going undefeated. Everybody's going to give them their best game. They'll be the preseason number one. And it's not logical to think they're going to go undefeated again. Someone's going to get them somewhere, you would think. And it's going to be a big deal. They're going to rush the floor wherever it is, and hopefully it won't happen, but there's just it just doesn't happen very often. And, so how the team reacts to a little adversity there, when and if that happens. But again, the biggest fun thing to watch will be to see how she handles the starting lineup, or who emerges and is really challenging for those 5 starting spots, because you lost a good one in Camilla, but boy, you still got a lot of good ones coming in and a lot of good ones coming back that all want to play.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last person I wanted to ask you about before we got you out of here and let you, we also let you plug everything where you're at on Twitter, everything like that. But Joyce Edwards, obviously she's the talk of this freshman class. They changed, or Dawn essentially made her a major through the honors program, or through the honors college, which is awesome. But yeah, there's a lot of hype behind her. She seems like another just great human being to be around, and great person to add to this program. What can you tell me about Joyce Edwards already?
Well, I'm looking forward to. I haven't met her in person yet, but I'm looking forward to that. I know she's going to be playing with one of the U.S. national teams, the under-18, or one of the teams this summer. So I want to talk to her about that experience for my day job, putting content on the athletics department website. But everything you hear about her fits into the role of what South Carolina has had. As good as she is, it's not one of those things that gets to her head, that she's a team player. She understands roles and all that kind of thing. And I think the neat thing is she's coming into a situation where, if she's a star right away, great, but she doesn't have to be. You liken it back to when Asia Wilson came here. You remember Asia's freshman year, she came off the bench. She came off the bench with Elena Coates. You had 2 All-Americans coming off the bench.
Which is crazy.
You want to talk about seeing other teams' shoulders slump. We put our starting 5 out there, punch you in the mouth, and here comes Asia and Elena at the first media timeout, and everyone just shoulders slump like, are you kidding me? So I think it can be similar for Joyce if she's not comfortable or ready, to quote unquote be the star at the beginning of the game. She doesn't have to be, and they'll bring her along. But from everything I've seen, she's going to be the real deal. She's going to be expected to do good things as a freshman, not one that you're going to wait and see what she can do as a sophomore. They'll expect her to contribute significantly, whether it's starting or coming off the bench right away. But it's going to be fun to watch how she handles that. She's used to being so much better than everyone else in high school. And now when you go, well, fortunately, she's not going to have to play against the likes of Angel Reese, but everybody's got somebody like that, right? I mentioned Texas. They've got some big posts. It's going to be interesting to see how she adapts to that, and how soon she can get in the weight room and put a little more muscle on and things like that. But everything I've heard, same thing you've heard, good kid, good family. I know that's something big to the coaching staff, is they recruit families as well, because they know if the parents are a problem, ain't nobody going to be happy. And, from everything I've heard, the parents are great, and the family is great, and it's just going to be a good fit. And it's just going to be fun to see how quickly, she adapts to the college game and what she can do early on.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be exciting to see, and I would love to, have you back on this show eventually as the season heats up and getting ready, and hopefully you get to know Joyce Edwards a little bit better. It'll be sweet, and obviously some more stories as well. But Brad, wanted to give you a chance to tell the people where you're at, and what's going on, as we do with all of our guests before we let you go.
All right. Well, yeah, my day job, I work in the athletics department, doing feature stories for the website. You can put most of the stories up on Twitter, or the athletics department tweets them. And my handle there, my Twitter handle at scbrad92. You can find me there. I saw someone in the comments was asking about any more books in the works. No, I wrote a book a couple of years ago. It's pinned to the top of my Twitter account. If you'd like to read it, it's great. It has nothing to do with sports. It's fiction, but give it a read and tell me what you think of it, or if you see me in the office, I'll give you a copy. I'd love for you to read it. But right now, just enjoying some downtime of not traveling. But we'll look forward to getting it going again in the fall. I work some of our home soccer games for the SEC network, so look forward to doing that again. And then getting ready in November. I guess we're starting off in Las Vegas against Michigan, so looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Brad, you're the man. I appreciate you coming on my show tonight. We'll be in touch, obviously, to get you back on here soon.
Thanks for having me. Anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it. That's the man, the myth, the legend, Brad Muller. Also one of the best professors at the J School. He teaches one of the best classes, as the streets have said. So yeah, now we get to talk about baseball. It's not going to be fun one, but what they did in Hoover this weekend is pretty crazy. It's obviously out of the blue for South Carolina baseball by all means. Um, you know, Winning 3 games, I believe. I got to pull it back up because it's been such a roller coaster weekend. As I pull it, but yeah, you lose twice to LSU. Um, not not the greatest weekend if you're asking me. But again, I think because at this point, if you wanted to do something crazy, you were going to win the whole thing. EXO checking in. It's all part of Jack's follow up for baseball. I'm just confused what was happening against LSU. So, what happened against LSU is it's obviously complicated as all heck because Blake Jackson was probably out at home. And there was the umps got together, right? As we know, we were all watching the game, and then they decided there was the ruling of catcher's interference. And so that moved, but it was on the pitch, and so that made it a balk. There was a lot of confusion with it. I don't have the official ruling in front of me because it was hard to find the exact quotation from the rule book. But what happened was that it was a catcher's interference, and then they ruled a balk because of it. It was not the balk did not offset the first event of that. I guess the whole thing of Jackson being safe, and so nonetheless, that whole the Blake Jackson being safe at home only allowed LSU to go ahead and have more fuel to the fire and step on a little bit more, step on the gas a little bit more. But so my question for, I guess, this whole thing is like, or for baseball this weekend is if now I'm not in the Fire Kingston boat. I don't think he should be fired. He put together a great team or great weekend with a struggling team who just lost 6 straight. They were playing with house money. I think that should be enough. And I think we knew going into this season that they didn't have the pitching as they have these last couple seasons. So certainly not on the Fire Kingston boat. And I'm glad. I mean, the comments have certainly led to it. Steven asked, did Kimball pitch better than his stats indicated? I heard there were a couple errors that were made that if he weren't, he could have had 4 scoreless innings pitched. I'm not sure exactly on the scoring errors, but I thought Roman Kimball pitched better. A lot better than we'd normally been seeing over these last couple of weeks here. I mean, Roman Kimball was kind of an afterthought, or not necessarily an afterthought because he had given you some good work, but just in terms of the future of this baseball team, like it looked like he was dead in the water for him. And then he gets to start, looks great, starts mowing down guys, and then you get to the bullpen, and the bullpen gives out once again for South Carolina. Not great. And the errors, yes, the errors. I don't really understand how the errors. I mean, because I thought there should have been more on the scoring. I don't know what was going on with SEC scoring, but there were like all of the fielding errors didn't necessarily track up. So I think statistically, yeah, Steven, um, Roman probably should have had a better, outing, I guess, than the stat line. But I haven't rewatched and dove into it yet, and done a full count of all the errors and stuff like that. So, yeah, again, I think the errors is the biggest thing with this team. Like, you just couldn't play defense. All of a sudden, you couldn't play defense, and I mean that's usually been a consistent theme with South Carolina and Hoover in general, right? But usually that just kind of ends your luck. The Bats were on fire. The Bats won. I mean, the Bats scored so many runs. I mean, you were in double digits 3 times this weekend, I think, which is unbelievable. But again, the pitching gave out. And then of course, obviously, the first one, Michael Braswell was quiet for the most part, and then just kind of came out, with a bang. That home run really ended things in that first game. But South Carolina comes back, gets a win against Kentucky, and looks back, I guess, right back. And so you go back to play LSU, you go up 8-0, and then the errors just add up. They add up. EXO asks, do you think the guys weren't ready? No, I thought the guys were, really ready for the challenge. I think, if they weren't ready, it would kind of be a 2 and done or 1 and done, right? I don't think the weekend would have lasted this long. They were ready for this moment. And the errors it was just sloppy, right? I think it was just one of those things where, you're on this crazy run after losing 6 games in a row. I think it was it was just more of second guessing, right? It's like, wow, we're here after doing all that, some second guessing, some positioning, bad hops. It's baseball. You can attribute it to a lot of different stuff, but I don't think it was the fact that they weren't ready, because the fact, like, I think the whole run said that they were ready to play some baseball. Now, I think it was just the errors goes into just guys second guessing themselves a lot. Stephen Bessinger says, not just with our team, but what is going on with hit by pitch in college baseball? Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. I think it's a good question. Everybody's getting plunked all the time. And I mean, this year, it's funny that you say that, because this year started off some kid. I can't remember where it was, but he got plunked in his first 6 at bats of his college career. It's so I have no idea. I don't know if it's the pitching getting a little bit more wild, if guys are just getting better, right, and throwing harder. And the spin rate's not catching up. I think maybe that could be a little bit of it, because in the majors they're all throwing hard, right? Everyone's throwing hard, but so in college, I think it could be a situation of maybe it's a little bit more wild, but I don't know. But so I mean, this baseball team, like, we'll see where they end up. Mike Yuva and I are going to do a selection show, just kind of recapping where they're at, recap the rest of the weekend, because I know this episode was focused on my guest this week, but also had to talk some baseball towards the end here. But I think so. I think we're still likely going to Clemson. Last I saw was the North Carolina regional, which also not a fun one. And I think out of the bids to possibly go, I think you'd rather have Clemson right now, but I don't know. I haven't caught up with the ACC tournament. I don't know how far Clemson made it after they lost. If they were 2 and out, I guess maybe. But if you look at a team, especially like South Carolina, like, what happened to South Carolina is that you lost a bunch of games and then you got hot. So I don't know if they want to be in the Clemson regional. I would prefer the North Carolina one. William says, Talking Tuesday night. Yeah, Talking Tuesday crew's getting together for a little baseball selection Monday recap show. We'll be breaking all of it down. And then, yeah, we should also have a Talking Tuesdays. But, yeah, Talking Tuesday. It's been Talking Tuesday afternoons recently. I don't know. I think it's just the off season, Mike. We got things going on Tuesday nights, but yeah, it's been fun. But so yeah, anything else baseball related? I know I've kind of touched on a lot, and then shout out to Brad Muller. That interview was awesome. Appreciate the comments and stuff. Everyone checking in for that. But yeah, let me know if you guys have anything baseball wise. I'm gonna hit our quick ad read real quick. Said that twice. But yeah, our first and only ad of the day, our good friend over at Movement Mortgage Network, Clint Hammond. He's the man in need of help with your mortgage. Call our good friend Clint Hammond of the Movement Mortgage Network. He's been in the mortgage industry since 2003, which allows him to help everyone from the first-time home buyer to the complicated and complex jumbo buyer, whether you're looking to purchase a new home or refinance. Nothing is more important than a well-thought-out financial strategy that comes with 5-star customer service. He's even helped out our very own Wes Mitchell and former Gamecock quarterback Perry Orth with their mortgages. So give our guy Clint a call. He's above us on all of our Gamecock Central live programming, 803-422-6797, 803-422-6797 for all of your mortgage needs. EXO says, North Carolina, not NC State, doesn't sound fun. Yeah, no. I saw the last D1 baseball projection that I saw was at UNC, not NC State. If you somehow end up in the UNC regional, I don't think it's going to be a lot of fun. But then again, I think Clemson coming off of 2 luck, because I don't think Clemson is in the ACC championship. Correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't done as much research on that as I'd like to be, but yeah, I don't trust Clemson playing against South Carolina, a team which you beat twice already. They have their number one is what that tells me, especially because you had the rain out, revenge game. I don't know. I don't like it, especially after they've been losing. You look at what happened to South Carolina, Duke. So Duke won the Duke won the ACC. Yeah, hot team, another hot team that you don't want to run into in June. So I guess one more week of no, we're in June here pretty soon after this week. It's crazy to think, but yeah, no. So we'll see. I don't know if there's really an ideal regional at this point. Just and who knows what team is going to show up. I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll be certainly talking about it, and we'll know what where exactly South Carolina is going tomorrow. Mike Uva and I will be live tomorrow afternoon. Yeah, a lot of hot Carolina teams. It's ridiculous. Yeah, and again, I think the bear of Clemson has been poked. So I don't want any smoke with Clemson at the moment, because as soon as earlier in this season when we were hot talking bring on Clemson, bad idea. This Clemson team's really good, and it's crazy to think that they're doing it without Billy Amick. And the fact that I'm talking about Clemson this much probably goes to show how good they are and whatnot. But yes. So Mike Uva and I will have a Selection Monday recap show tomorrow, Talking Tuesday afternoons on Tuesday, and then back with your regularly scheduled programming. Foul balls on Thursday. So if you missed any of our show tonight or my show tonight, head back over to the Gamecock Central YouTube page. And if you missed us, when you subscribe, you can hit the little bell icon. It'll let you know whenever we're going live. So appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. Really good show. Again, Brad Muller, the man, the myth, the legend. He was awesome tonight. Appreciate him joining me as well. So appreciate it. You guys have a great week, and we will talk to you tomorrow.